Hello everybody, good morning today. Hope you had a good weekend. A couple of announcements to start with. So first of all, many of you have turned in your introductions for your self-introductory speech, so good job on that. I have provided some feedback. Lots of you did really, really great, so there wasn't a lot of things to say. So I've provided some feedback as far as that goes. Your next step then is to complete your whole speech. So you will be creating an outline for the whole speech. Some of you already had the whole speech completed, which is fine. But it's a good idea to have it in outline form instead of written out form. So that's just a rule in general that I'd like to say. So you'd have your outline that you will turn in to me, and you will send that in an email that says your name and self-introductory speech. And to that email, you're going to attach two things. So you're going to attach your speech outline, and then also you're going to attach the interview questions and answers that you have completed. So remember, you're going to be doing an interview. You're going to write your speech, and then you're going to come up with 2 or 3 questions that you can ask to somebody else. So if you are talking about being a mom, maybe you ask your kids, maybe you ask your partner, maybe you ask whoever, somebody who knows you well in whatever role that you are talking about. You're going to ask them some questions. So, you know, how did you first know that I loved playing soccer? You might ask your mom. And then you write down her answer. And so in your speech, as one of your supporting materials, you're going to quote your mom saying, I knew that you were that soccer was going to be your passion on your 5th birthday when you asked for your Christmas presents and they were a soccer ball and a soccer poster and a soccer book or whatever. So you're going to use a quote from that interview, basically the same thing as if you were quoting a magazine or a newspaper article or a book. So you're going to take a quote from that interview and you're going to include it in the body of your speech. So make sure that you include when you're sending me the link to your speech, make sure you include your typed outline and then your interview questions and answers. And then the other thing in that email, what's going to happen is there's going to be a link to your speech. And I think the easiest way, as I've been looking through different ways to do this, is to upload your speeches to YouTube, and then you can create a link and send that link to me. So basically all you're going to do is you're going to record your speech. You can do it like I'm doing now, where I use the webcam on my computer to record myself talking, and then it just saves on your computer, or you can record it on your phone, have yourself or somebody else, or maybe you are a YouTube star already and you have equipment that you can use. However you're going to do it, you're going to record a video of you giving your speech. It's a good idea if you are standing when you give these formal speeches. And so it shouldn't be just of your face. I'm right here, you're just seeing mostly my face and the top of my body, but for these speeches, we'd like to see kind of as much of your body as possible, because one of the things you will be evaluated on are, gestures, and that you're not rocking back and forth or pacing too much or that type of thing. So now the simple way to do that is simply, you can set up your webcam and then stand back further. Okay, so let's see where I can go. So this is a good distance as far as giving your speech that way. Okay, so so you record your speech, save it on your phone or on your device. Then what you'll do is you'll go to YouTube and you can log in. You're welcome to log in on whatever account you want, but if you don't have a different email that you want to attach to YouTube, you can use your Wabansi email address to log into your YouTube account. And so once you do that, there's a little thing up in the corner that says insert a video or record a video or whatever. So you'll click on that and you'll be given 2 options: to live stream a video or to upload a video. And so I choose upload. Then it'll ask you to either drag and drop it or select it from your device. copy and paste it, whatever you want to do. So you'll do that. It'll take a while to upload that video. Now these first videos are only 3 to 5 minutes, so it shouldn't take that long. Sometimes my lectures, when they're like an hour, take a couple hours to upload to YouTube. But keep in mind, it will take some time to upload to YouTube. The other thing is I don't have internet. I use a hotspot, so that might be part of my uploading problem. But it takes a couple hours to upload a video if it's longer. Again, these ones are going to be a little shorter, so it shouldn't take as long. And then it will process, and then it will say finished. And so once that is finished, there's a little circle to the right that says, you know, share, and you can copy the link. Okay. And then, so then you'll type your email, John Smith, self-introductory speech. You'll copy and paste that link to your YouTube channel into the account, and then attach your outline and your interview questions and answers, and then send that all to me. And again, these are due on Wednesday, but feel free to, you can send it today, you can send it Tuesday if you want to get things done and get ahead of the game. It kind of depends on your style as far as learning goes. So for this class, I'm going to try to put things out a little bit earlier so people who want to do things ahead can do things ahead. Okay, so that is for the speeches. Please, 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 if you have any questions on the speeches, email me. I know I started a discussion board. That's kind of not working great. Well, I mean, it's fine. Nobody's commenting there, but it's just as easy if you just send me an email that has questions about it. So if you want to do that, please do that. Okay, so that's the first thing. Also, if you haven't done your intro yet, I'll still accept intros. I know I said they were due Friday, but again, with everything that's going on, I'm going to be a little bit more lenient with due dates this semester. So if you want to send me your intro, you know, I'll take them until Tuesday night. It doesn't make any sense for you to send me your intro on Wednesday, the same day that you do your speech, because the point of you sending me your intros is that I can give you feedback and we can kind of troubleshoot some stuff. So if you haven't turned in your intro yet and you still want to turn it in up until tomorrow night, Tuesday evening, that's fine. I will send you feedback on that. Okay, so part 1 of the class, those speeches. The next speech after that will be a how-to speech. So we'll start talking about that. So I probably won't do a video Wednesday, but what I'll probably do, well, we'll see what happens. I probably won't do a video on Wednesday. That will be time I'll be here to talk to you. If anybody needs to talk in a one-on-one, like if you don't want to talk through email and you'd rather have a phone call conversation, please feel free to email me your phone number and we can be in touch that way. And also it's a good idea to do times that you're available. But email me your phone number and we can work through that way as well. Okay, so there won't be a video on Wednesday. I'll be grading speeches. You'll be submitting speeches. We won't have a lot to talk about till after those speeches are done. So then the next video I'll do, we'll talk about how you did on your speeches and kind of just a general overview, different kind of general things that I noticed from the speeches. So kind of a speech wrap up. And then the next speech that you'll be working on will be a how-to speech. And again, you'll have about a week and a half for that. It's about a week and a half for each speech. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing that you should be working on are quizzes. So basically speeches and quizzes are your assignments for this semester. The quiz for chapter 1 and 2 is up on Blackboard right now. Only one person has taken it though. I put tonight as a due date. We'll see how many people get in and I'll probably extend that. But because the due dates are relaxed, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea to wait till the end of whenever and try to turn everything in all at the same time. Like that's just, if you want to be successful, I think that's going to be a very bad idea. So even though I am extending some of these deadlines, it's better if you go by the original deadlines that I'm getting you in and turn all this stuff in then. So technically the deadline is tonight by midnight to take this quiz, but we'll see what happens. I might give people some flexibility on that. The next quiz will be on chapters 3 through 5. There won't be any short answer questions from lectures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that quiz up right away. So again, you finish your speech on Wednesday, you are complete as far as that goes. You don't have, I mean, I don't know what your load's like in your other classes, but if you have some free time, start reading chapters 3 through 5. I'll put that up so you can just go in, and if you want to take that and get that out of the way ahead of time, then that's available to you. Okay. But what I want to do today is talk a little bit about chapters 1 and 2. This is, so when I talk about the speeches and that type of thing, some of that stuff will be on the quizzes in the short answer form. But as far as the true, false, and multiple choice, it's mostly straight word for word out of the book, kind of key ideas from the chapter. And so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about some of the ideas in chapter 1 and 2, but I'm going to have more of just a conversation and kind of talk about the ideas in a more abstract way, just to get you introduced to communication. So the first thing that you want to do is think about what is communication. And so a basic definition of communication is to exchange information from one person. We're going to use person, but it could be an alien, or it could be dogs communicate, whatever. But it's to transfer information from one entity to another, basically. Okay, so if you think of it in terms of yourself, you think of, okay, you have a thought or an idea or a feeling or something, like, why do you communicate? Well, it's because there's something in your brain that you want to tell somebody else, right? We don't usually communicate for a lot of other reasons than to get our ideas or feelings into the brain of somebody else. Okay, so when we talk about communication, there's usually a sender and a receiver in the most basic forms, somebody who's sending the message, somebody who's receiving the message. Now, your book talks about different models of communication, the linear model of communication, so you can think about that, you know, the basic sender and receiver. So think about if you're scrolling through your Facebook feed. That is a linear model of communication, because somebody posted a message. They weren't looking at you when they posted the message, like you weren't even involved in that when they were posting the message. Or think about watching the news on TV. That is a linear model where somebody is sending a message to you. They don't see you, they don't hear you, but they are just kind of putting it out there, and you are receiving it in that way. In the interactional model, there's some feedback back and forth. So you might send something, so you can think about this as like in the YouTube videos, or that like comments where you might comment back and forth to each other, and you have that information. But the most kind of face-to-face use what we call the transactional model of communication, and that's basically when the sender and the receiver are both sending and receiving messages kind of simultaneously. So think about when you're speaking to somebody. You know, sometimes you talk over each other, sometimes you interrupt each other, you're nodding, you're giving feedback to the person in many different ways. And so there's always kind of this give and take from both parties, and so that happens a lot of times in communication. Now, the thing with communication is it's really, really hard, and I said this in the first video, that I think there should be communication classes from the time we're born, and we kind of take for granted that communication is a skill that should be learned and it needs to be honed, and that also it takes work and there's a lot of things going on. So if life was perfect and we lived in a vacuum and that's all there was sending this information, that would be great. But there's a lot of things that get in the way of communication happening efficiently and effectively. And when you look at different research studies about how successful communication is, you'll find that there are mistakes all the time. Depending on what study you look at, you know, 55% miscommunication, 80% miscommunication, and this is in different fields. So like they'll look at doctors, and they'll look at like mistakes that happen in the healthcare setting or in healthcare situations. And they'll see that I can't remember what the number was on this one, but like 75% of all mistakes that happen in healthcare are because of miscommunication. Maybe somebody can't read something on the chart, or somebody forgot to write something on the chart, or maybe somebody speaks different language and they misinterpret their prescription, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So a lot of problems in this world can be solved just if we communicated better. And so that's why I really am super passionate about teaching people to communicate better. I just think it's a really important skill that we have. And so it's something that I encourage you, again, the way that this class is happening right now, it's hard for me. I like to interact with students. I like to talk to them and watch them communicate and then give them feedback on that. We won't be able to do a lot of that, but I just encourage you on your own time. You know, read, there's tons of books out there on how to communicate better. Lots of good tips there. There's YouTube videos. There's, you know, practice with people who you trust, friends who you trust, you know, practice communicating, family members, significant others. Anyway, that's enough about how passionate I am about doing communication right. Okay, so what gets in the way? What causes the miscommunication? Well, the first thing is that when we're sending messages back and forth, there's something called noise. Okay, and noise is basically anything that might distort or interrupt the message from getting in its original form from one person to the other. And I'm going to use person kind of generically. So it could be physical noise in your environment. If you're watching this video right now, or like when I'm trying to talk to you and my dog's whining down by my feet, that is noise. That distracts me from providing the message in the best way possible. Maybe you are somewhere right now where you have kids or brothers and sisters or somebody else kind of talking around you, or maybe there's a TV on, or you have your radio on, or whatever you're doing. All these things are a type of kind of physical noise that distract you from interacting with the message. And when you think about most of your communication daily, there's lots of things going on, and so there's always kind of that physical noise. Another kind of noise is also the noise that's going on in your head, or psychological noise. And more broadly defined, we'll talk about this as cognition and perception. Okay, so you might be watching this video and you might be super hungry. Or maybe you just got in a fight with your significant other and you're kind of thinking about that. And so you're paying attention, but you're not really paying attention because your mind wanders to other things, or you're worried about your speech or whatever. So you have all these things going on in your brain that can interfere with your ability to hear a message very well. Okay. And then also there's all these contexts going on. There's all these different things around you that that are tricky as far as identifying it. So you have to be aware of who you're talking to and where you're talking at. And those things can interfere how you interrupt with, or how you interpret a message. So those are kind of all kinds of external things that interfere with the message, but then there's also your internal stuff, your psychology, your perception. And our perception of ourselves and the world around us can very much change the way that we communicate with people. So when we talk about our brains and how our brains are organized, kind of the main thing that we talk about are called schema. And schema are the categories, the things in our brain that we use to categorize stuff. So you have a schema of what something you write with looks like. Okay. And let's see. So now this is a very obvious, you know, a pencil, a Sharpie. So you might kind of have an idea of what something to write looks like. And so you might see this, and this is a different type of dry erase marker, but the first time you ever saw a dry erase marker, if you already knew these, you would be able to figure out what a dry erase marker was. Or think about dogs. You know, the first dog you ever saw might be a black lab, right? And so you kind of get this idea of what a dog is in your mind, what they look like, how big they are, blah, blah, blah. But then you might go and see a poodle sometime and still know that's a dog, even though it's the first time you've ever seen a poodle before, you understand that that's still a dog. Okay, so schema are the ways that we organize things. Now, schema have some bad effects too, because when we talk about stereotypes or that type of thing, that all comes from our schema, basically. We learn what it means to be a woman or a man or whatever. And that is something that sticks with us. And so that schema, being locked into that schema, creates those stereotypes. And then it's hard for us to break free from there. So the same things that help us, because if you didn't have schema, you wouldn't be able to, you'd walk around and every time you saw something new, you'd be like, what is this thing? What am I supposed to do with it? Right? You would like have no idea how to maneuver in your world. It would just be way too hard. So schema are very useful. Like we need them in order to live. Otherwise you'd go crazy. But they do lock us in sometimes and say, and keep our perceptions from being able to be more creative. There's a cool experiment in psychology where they give people like a thumbtack and a candle and a box of matches. And they say, you know, attach the candle to the wall somehow with just these things. And so they look and see, you know, can you think outside the box and find different ways to use these objects other than what you normally would? And so the answer is to open the book of matches or the box of matches and use the bottom, dump out the matches, use the bottom as like a pin the bottom to, because people try to pin the candle to the wall or that type of thing. Pin the box to the wall and then put the candle in there. Okay, anyway. But like think about a chair. Okay, a chair is typically used for us to sit in, but also we could use it as a step stool, or we could use it, you could put two chairs together and put a sheet over them and make a fort or whatever. So those are kind of basic ideas, and we call this thinking outside the box, right? Those are basic ideas where, again, you might have adapted your schema for those uses already. But the real challenge is being able to look at something that you know exactly what it is and use it in a different way. And that is how we kind of challenge our schemas. And like I said, how that relates to communication is because we can get caught in these traps. We can get caught into our schemas. And there's schemas for concepts, but there's also schemas called scripts and that type of thing for how we interact with people. So if you are finding yourself having the same argument with somebody over and over again, it's probably because you have some sort of schema attached to that, and you're just kind of doing the same thing that you always do. So if you can change that pattern, okay, then it opens up like many new doors as far as communication goes. Okay, so that's one thing that gets in the way, is our schemas locked into this is how things are done. And so if you've been in past relationships and you say, okay, well, this is how things are done, then that can be troublesome. Another thing that happens are called attributions. So attributions is anytime we attribute some sort of meaning to somebody else, whether it's their behavior or what they say or that type of thing. So for an example, you're driving down the highway and you are, you know, driving however, and somebody comes up and they're tailgating right behind you, and then they cut into this lane and then cut right back in front of you, and they're, in your mind, you're like, that person is driving like a mad person. That person is an asshole, right? That person is a jerk. So you have made an attribution about that person based on their actions. And what we find is that attributions aren't always correct. And so you kind of want to kind of suspend those judgments if you can. The other thing that we find is we are pretty mean to other people and pretty nice to ourselves. So maybe you're a perfect driver, but has there ever been a time where you drove like that? Or where, you know, you ran a red light, or whatever the bad driving situation is? If that's the case, then when you did that, you probably thought, oh my gosh, I'm late for class. I have an exam. I'm going to miss it. And that's why you're driving like that. Or somebody's sick and I have to get there. Or, oh crap, I wasn't paying attention. That's my bad. Blah, blah, blah. And so you never go, man, well, not never. Some people do, but you usually aren't like, man, look at me driving fast. I'm an asshole or whatever. And so what we find is that people tend to be kinder to themselves when they're making attributions, and they look for reasons that aren't, oh, that person's just a jerk. And so if we're making those attributions about other people and we see that maybe a lot of times they're wrong, okay? Maybe that person isn't talking to you, you know, not because they think you're stupid, but because they're scared. Okay, maybe that's why they're not calling you. Or maybe they got a lot of stuff going on and they just don't have the time, but you know, so that type of thing. Okay, so these types of misattributions and mismatched schema, again, can lead to things like stereotypes. And stereotypes are basically any time that we have a thought about a group of people in general. I guess we could have, I guess for communication's sake, we're going to use that word. Technically, you could have a stereotype about oranges, I think. But so anytime you have an attitude, you know, people who are Asian are good at math is a stereotype. Women are bad drivers is a stereotype. Men don't have any emotions is a stereotype, right? These things are not true in general, but they have been perpetuated, and so they're things that we think about it. Prejudice is anytime you, so those can be factual things, and stereotypes too, just to be clear, stereotypes can be good. So technically, like Asians are good at math is a good stereotype, right? You're saying something positive about it. So it doesn't have to be, you know, all these people are drug dealers or whatever, or all these people are murderers or whatever, like we hear some stereotypes. Like it could be a good stereotype, a positive stereotype. All these people have lots of money, okay? That type of thing. So it's just a factual thing that you apply, like a fact that you apply to a whole group of people versus individually trying to decide if it's true or not. Whereas prejudice has more to do with your feelings about them and negative feelings towards that. So if you hold a stereotype and then you hate people who are like that because of that stereotype, that's when we're talking about prejudice. And then discrimination takes it one step further, because discrimination then adds a behavior. So now you don't hire somebody, whatever, woman, man, ethnicity, sexuality, whatever, you don't hire them for that reason, or you don't talk to them for that reason, that type of thing. Okay, so we want to try and challenge our schema. We want to try and challenge our attributions. One thing you can think of when you are thinking about communicating with other people is to try and put yourself in their shoes, to try and have more empathy when you're speaking with them and more compassion about towards that person, instead of, you know, being combative. And again, this is like in a conflict situation, but even in everyday situations, that's just something good to do. Okay, so what else? So not only our kind of way that we view the outside world can have, sorry, my dog. Anytime I do that, there's something with my dog. But also the way that we view ourself can affect how we communicate. So there's something called the self-concept. Your self-concept is basically just everything that you know about yourself. What hobbies do you like to do? What personality traits do you assign to yourself? What, basically all, if you wrote down all the facts about you, your I am statements were part of your self-concept, right? self-concept are the things that you know about yourself, all the things that create kind of your picture of yourself in your brain. That's very different than something that we call self-esteem. So self-esteem is basically how you attribute good or badness to that self-concept. So it's how positively or negatively you feel about yourself. And so, you know, we say some people have good self-esteem and we have some people have bad self-esteem. And self-esteem is tricky because back in, I would say 80s, 90s, there was a big push for self-esteem. And there was some research that came out that suggested that building kids' self-esteem is the way to make them better people. And so there was like a crap ton of books, like self-help books about how to have better self-esteem. And this is when people started getting like participation trophies. You know, it was give positive feedback all the time. Oh my gosh, that's so wonderful. That's amazing. That's great. You always wanted to tell your kids that how wonderful they were doing. And what we see was that experiment backfired terribly. And I think most of you guys are probably kind of on the tail end of that. I'm not sure if it still happened, but how long it went. But what we found was, and the the example that I always think of when I think about how this failed was, if you think about like, at least early, I haven't seen American Idol in lots of many years, but at least early American Idol, where you'd have somebody and they'd go in and they'd sing for the judges and they were just like, objectively, they were not good at singing. But then they'd come out and they'd talk to Ryan Seacrest and they'd be like, oh my God, these judges don't know what they're talking about. I am the best singer in the world. Everybody tells me what a good singer I am. My mom tells me what a good singer I am. My friends tell me what a good singer I am. Like, I have been singing for 10 years and everybody always says all the time, oh my God, you're an amazing singer. So I don't know what those judges are talking about. All right, so that is an example of self-esteem that the people around you have been telling you how good you are, and really maybe you're not objectively that good at that thing. And so what we found was that, and when I say we, I mean scientists who study psychology and communication, what the research shows is the self-esteem movement sucked. And it was the worst idea ever, and you should not artificially inflate people's self-esteem for good outcomes. Instead, what we find is being more honest about people's strengths and abilities is exactly what people need. And, you know, you don't have to be like, you suck at singing, but saying, you know, perhaps singing isn't the best place for you, or perhaps you might be better at this. And so what we found was more realistic assessments of people's abilities. It does two things. So first of all, it stops a lot of wasted time. Like, there are some people who just will never be good singers. Like, you can practice every day, every minute of your life. They just can't hear pitch or whatever. And so what's better, to tell that person they're an amazing singer and have them feel happy, and I would argue that I bet at some level people know when they're not good at something and people are lying to them, but that's a whole different thing. Or to say, well, maybe that's not what you're great at, but maybe you're awesome at science, or maybe you're amazing at art, other forms of art, like painting or whatever. So instead of trying to convince somebody that they're amazing at something that they probably know they aren't, and you know they aren't, how about say, well, you're not great at that, but look at all these other things that you are great at. Because then the person gets, it builds a sense of self-worth from actual things that exist in reality. But then also the other thing that it does is, if you tell somebody they're a great singer, it doesn't give them the chance to improve, to be better. So if you're like, oh my God, you're so good at math, you're doing great, and the kid really isn't good at math, they're never going to get better at math if they already think they're awesome at it. Like, think about, if you think you're great at something already, you're not going to, like, if there's no reason to try and get better, why would you try and get better? Okay, so anyway, with self-esteem, what we see is self-esteem is not the best thing to have. And which is kind of a side note, but it's related. So when we're to bring it back to communication, how our self-esteem is can also affect how we communicate. And that can go in both directions. So if you have a low self-esteem, you might be more tentative in your communication. You might have some hindrances in your communication, or the way you communicate, or how much risk you take when communicating, or how often you try to communicate. And so again, there's where that idea with, instead of telling people they have good or bad self-esteem, you know, or instead of telling people they're good or really good at stuff, or really bad at stuff, which can affect their self-esteem, it's much better to say, here's the things you're good at and here's the things you're bad at, or here's what you're bad at right now, but you can get better. Those types of things. Another thing that affects our communication is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so if you've heard the word self-fulfilling prophecy before, most of the time you think about it as your own self, and that's how it's usually talked about. So if you think you're going to do bad on a test, what we find is people who think they're going to do bad a lot of times will do bad. And depending on which research you look at, sometimes it's because you kind of psych yourself out and make yourself too nervous and then do bad for that. Another reason might be if you think you're going to do bad, you might behave in a way that makes you do bad. So I'm going to do bad anyway, so I'm not going to study. I'm just going to watch TV instead of studying because I already know I'm going to do bad. And so that type of behavior, basically then you're creating the behavior that creates the outcome. Whereas maybe if you did study, you might have done okay. And the same thing that can happen in communication situations. So if you go to a party and you're like, well, I'm introverted and people don't like me, you're probably going to act in a way that's introverted and make people not like you. You're going to be closed off with your body language. You're not going to make a lot of eye contact. You're probably going to be kind of shy and tentative when you're talking. You're probably not going to seek out conversations from different people. And so all of these things are just going to then reinforce this idea. And then you're going to go home and go, yep, see, I'm stuck at parties and nobody likes me. When really it might not be that nobody likes you. It might be that you're creating the behaviors that are hindering that communication. And we can do that to other people too. So if somebody comes over and you're like, well, I'm not going to like this person, then the way you communicate with them is going to basically create that situation. You're going to talk to them different. You're going to maybe be short with your answers. Like think about when you're mad and you're pretending like you're trying not to be mad. Like, I'm not mad. And you don't admit that you're mad, but then you create conflict because you're like, yep, nope, yep. And so you're creating the situation where, you know, you're escalating that conflict with the person instead of because you already think those types of things. That's probably not the best example, but it kind of just came to my mind. Okay, so that is just, again, a quick overview of some of the stuff that they talked about in chapters 1 and 2. But the best idea as far as the quiz goes is to make sure that you are reading the chapters because that's going to give you the best information. So make sure you're taking the quiz for chapters 1 and 2. Make sure you read the questions and all the parts of the questions, okay? And then make sure you're working on your speeches and you have those uploaded by Wednesday. And then again, no video on Wednesday, but if you need to talk to me or phone chat or do whatever, let me know, or email me anytime. I've been checking my email 3 or 4 times throughout the day, so I will get back to you as soon as I can. And good luck on everything. Okay, let me know if you have any trouble. All right, bye.